Good evening, Father Murr, on Friday, June 21st, 2024.
Good evening to you, Dr. Moynihan. How you doing?
I am tormented, but I'm filled with great energy, and particularly with your collaboration, I always feel we can confront anything.
Well, you know what? I want to suggest something right off. Why don't we start this in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost? Amen. And ask our Lord, ask the Holy Spirit to keep us on the straight and narrow in this conversation, and not to get sidestepped into anything that's scandalous or that would be harmful or hurtful. We're here to discuss some things that are a little bit delicate that have come up. I think everybody knows what we're talking about, and you can get more into it. But let's try our best to stay with the facts of things and clear of gossip and scandal. Okay. I mean, I know you agreed with that. I'm not asking. I know you are, but
thank you, Father.
We ask God's grace for that intention. Okay.
Yes, that's a pastoral way to begin, and I suppose, in certain sense, the church is a community. It's a family. It's the mystical body of Christ, and divisions in the church and excommunications are terrible things. We've been speaking for years of how we want the church to be inclusive at the leadership level, and yet at the same time, we are now facing terrific tensions, perhaps greater than any we've seen for many years.
Mm-hmm. So there's no doubt of that.
I would also say that some of these come from within the church. I just actually, by coincidence or providence, one of the great Roman cardinals, an African cardinal, Robert Sarah, was visiting Virginia a week ago, and actually he gave a beautiful talk at Christendom College, which is in Front Royal, Virginia. And he also spoke at the Catholic University of America in Washington. And we talked about the Viganó case privately. He actually visited me, and it was on his birthday, June 15th. He turned 79 years old, and he said he was very sad about the unfolding tensions between Archbishop Viganó and those who appreciate and support him and believe that he's a very important voice, kind of, what do we call, a whistleblower, and that the Vatican has waited now for 5 years. Since 2018, in the summer, it's actually 6 years when Archbishop Viganó issued his testimony, where he said there'd been a kind of cover-up of abuse, particularly with the Cardinal McCarrick case, but also in other cases. And 6 years have now passed by, and just yesterday, the Archbishop released a statement, which I published as a letter, and he said that he had been summoned to Rome to go yesterday, June 20th, and that he's going to be processed on trial. And I'll read what he said, just so we have the actual words.
Great.
The Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith has informed me with a simple email of the initiation of an extrajudicial penal trial against me, with the accusation of having committed the crime of schism, and charging me of having denied the legitimacy of Pope Francis, of having broken communion with him, and of having rejected the Second Vatican Council. So, denial of Pope Francis, broken communion with him, and having rejected the Second Vatican Council. 3 points. I have been summoned to the Palace of the Holy Office on June 20th, in person or represented by a canon lawyer. I assume that the sentence has already been prepared, given that it is an extrajudicial process. And that means he thinks he's already been condemned, and therefore is likely to be judged guilty of schism, and for that reason excommunicated. A moment of silence.
Are you waiting for a reaction from me? Because
Yeah.
I've got one. I've got a reaction.
React to this scenario.
Yes. We've talked about this before. Canon law doesn't seem to be really concerned an awful lot of times with justice. Canon law seems to be used by the higher ups to justify their moves. Many priests, I think if you would talk to the majority of priests around the world, where I think we're 430,000 priests in the world. If you would talk to any number of those priests, you would find that they're not so excited about canon law. They don't see that canon law benefits them at all. They see that canon law benefits bishops, but not priests and laity. That's what they see. Also, in this case, I think what you could, without too much difficulty, see is that canon law is benefiting the Vatican. And I think that's what Archbishop Viganó is saying. He was just summoned, this, that, and the other thing. There was no preparation, nothing. It's already decided. And I think what he's almost saying, it's funny because it's almost parallel. How many times we've said, or I've said, Robert, that the problem with our world today is both the church and the state, the religious and the secular, are in crisis. And when we look at the trial that Trump just went through in New York, it's that sort of a thing that people feel that the fix is in, that things are already set against people who are being charged with anything. And I think that's what Viganó also is saying, and I think that's what he feels.
Okay. Well, you gave a very general picture of canon law and the general appreciation of the process of law and judgment in the church. But what about Viganó's case itself? A lot of people are wondering why now. And I must also add, today I think is the longest day of the year, isn't it? June 21st.
I'm sure for Viganó it seems that way.
Yeah. Well,
and for the members of the Roman Curia who are involved in this. I would say this, Robert. It happened now. This all hit now. This has been going on for years. What Viganó began saying, and pardon me when I say Viganó, I don't mean any disrespect by not saying His Excellency Archbishop. I don't mean that. I'm just for economy's sake of time. Viganó has been very vocal right from the beginning of Francis's pontificate, criticizing, and correctly criticizing, according to me and according to anybody, most of the people I know, when he saw things that were not happening correctly, that were not going about, they were not happening correctly. They were not following a process. There was no clarity. We've talked about this many times before. There was no clarity. There wasn't any ongoing education. There was no defense of doctrine. And it seems that so much of that was under attack, and there was no defense of it from the Vatican, certainly not from the Holy Father. This is what bothered him right from the beginning, as it bothered most of us. Also, when things would come out of the Vatican that seemed to be insulting to Catholics in different countries.
Yes.
This didn't help at all. And I'll tell you something. If I would to pinpoint, I can only speak for myself on this, but I was battling with overlooking this and trying to find a reason for that and justifying the other, and maybe I didn't have all the facts and I didn't know, forgiving everything as if I had to forgive, right? For different things that happened during this pontificate. But I've got to tell you, Robert, and I don't know how else to say it but the way I'm going to say it. When I saw what happened in the Vatican Gardens with the Pachamama, statue image and the procession that ensued into St. Peter's Basilica, that I think I and millions of Catholics around the world were stunned. We're stunned. And I think from that point on, we've had great difficulty with this pontificate. And there wasn't really an explanation. There was certainly no apology for it, no explanation, nothing. And this is the way things have been going on for the longest time. And Viganó has been one of the voices who actually spoke to what a lot of people were thinking, right?
Yeah.
You know very well yourself that he is loved and unloved by many people. A lot of people love him, and a lot of people despise him. They're upset with him. The man is in a precarious situation. To some degree, he put himself there, but to another degree, he did not put himself there. He was reacting to what was happening, and he was reacting, I believe, in good conscience. That's my take on it.
Okay, we have a number of things we probably should set on the table here. I know Viganó quite well. I've spent many days with him. I just was in contact with him again last night by text message. And I said to him, did you actually go to Rome and appear yesterday? And I'm speaking to you today from Virginia. And I left Rome because it's quite hot now, and I wanted to try to get a little better health over here. But the phrase in the America article by Jerry O'Connell yesterday was, America has learned that Archbishop Viganó presented himself this afternoon, June 20th, and deposited his written defense, which was subsequently published in a blog of a supporter of his. Now, I asked Viganó, did you present yourself? And he said, no, I did not. I said, did you send a lawyer or a representative? He said, no, I did not. I just ignored it. So something is already odd that America Magazine, which is supposedly quite respectable, which has Jerry O'Connell is a friend of mine. I've known Jerry for almost 40 years, and he knows Pope Francis very well. His wife wrote a book about Pope Francis, and Jerry wrote this, America has learned that Archbishop Viganó presented himself this afternoon, June 20th. They wrote that yesterday. But it's not true, Viganó said. He didn't present himself. So you mentioned to me before the program, you thought that they're creating a narrative here. I don't understand. I don't really believe that Jerry himself would have published something he knew was false, but maybe someone told him something that was false and he published it.
Well, there are many ways. There are many ways of getting things through the media to the public. You know that. I mean, most of the reporters that we have on television or on cable news or what have you are not lying to the public. They are repeating what was given to them to say. Okay. This is what I was talking about. The fix being in. This is sort of going to that point.
Okay.
It sounds like there's something already decided. This is what I'm saying.
Absolutely. So
you're just explaining that there is.
Well, I just think it relates to so many things I've seen over the years, and since I'm getting older now, I'm going to refer to some of them. Pope Benedict's resignation was never explained fully.
That's right.
And Viganó was involved 2 years before the resignation with various maneuvers in the Vatican, which were called Vati leaks. People were taking documents right off of Benedict's desk. And this group that Julia Maloney has written a book about, the San Gallen Mafia, was preparing to remove Benedict one way or another, get another man to their liking into power. And therefore, it raises the question of the legitimacy of that conclave. I could watch that all during 2011, 2012. The night of February 11th, 2013, I was in Rome when Benedict resigned that morning, and everyone was looking at each other and saying, that must be a hoax.
Yes.
Can't be true. It was 700 years before anything like that. But we also know that the documents that were released by WikiLeaks about the texts and emails sent between people in the United States like Hillary Clinton, John Podesta, and somehow related even to George Soros, had talked about the necessity of having an Arab Springtime in the Vatican. In other words, it was necessary for the people who at that time thought they would be leading the United States of America, the Obama administration, and then Hillary. They thought that in their emails, they were saying, what is really the linchpin of our globalist plan is a change in the way the Vatican looks at a number of issues. And they're so intransigent, stuck in the past, we're going to have to somehow force the matter.
Yes, and let me just jump in here, Robert, to say this. Catholicism is the largest religion in the world. I think it was overtaken just a couple of years ago by Islam, but it was until that point the largest religion in the world, certainly the largest Christian religion. While it's only 22% of the United States population, what people have to understand is this: there is a particular hatred, not toward Christianity, they're also toward Christianity in general, but very specifically a hatred against Catholicism. And why is that?
Yes.
Because the church for 2 millennia has stood in opposition to the spirit of the world. When the spirit of the world was trampling human rights, when the spirit of the world was not defending the truth of matters, when the spirit of the world was immoral, what have you. Now, be very careful here. People inside the church herself, all of us, beginning with me, we're all sinners. Everyone is imperfect. We understand that. And I've said this 1,000 times, and it's been said many times before I've said it. The reason for which I can be part of the Catholic Church is because I'm a sinner. If it were perfect and only for perfect people, I wouldn't be here. Maybe Robert would be here. Would you be here, Robert? You would be one of the perfect people. All right.
Everything is grace, Father. Everything is grace. Even
So
our,
here's
our sufferings.
My point is this. My point is that the church, made up of imperfect people, has always striven to teach the truth. It's always strived. Is it strived or striven? I think it is striven. I've never had the past participle of that with a problem with it before, but the church has always, in spite of her own imperfections, has stood up for the truth and defended it. This is why the church is hated. This is why the church is hated. And this is why the politicians in the world have to get to the church. This is why, Robert, we began our relationship years ago on other things, but we got into the thing of Gagnon and the report and his investigation on Freemasonry within the Roman Curia. It's the same thing. These people who have the spirit of the world wanted to get inside the church to contaminate it and to break it down.
Well, it's even more than that, Father. Even more than that.
You just mentioned Clinton and a few others, and Soros, who specifically said this in the WikiLeaks, in the WikiLeaks, that they had to deal with the Catholic Church because the Catholic Church is standing in the way of what they consider progress. All right.
Okay.
This is why.
I want to say they didn't want the destruction of the church, to eliminate it. They wanted to go inside, replace the healthy and often with great difficulty and suffering loyalty of the members of the church to Jesus Christ, and create a kind of simulacrum, a replacement for the church from the inside out.
Yes.
And this has been somehow, and I don't mean to be a conspiracy theorist, but I've been living and watching and seeing changes made here and there over the days, months, years, decades, and they are accomplishing that process.
Yes, they are. And
So-
who spoke to this beautifully, succinctly, and incredibly clearly was Pope Pius X. In his encyclical on modernism, he explained it all, he said it all, and he told us what to be careful for, what to look out for, because he said these things were going to happen. They were already, the seeds were already sown, right?
Okay, yeah, we have so many points to bring up. I apologize to our viewers. We want to look at why Viganó got into this position. We also want to look into the views that he's expressed with regard to Vatican II, to the popes who came after, Paul VI, John Paul I, John Paul II, and Pope Benedict, and now Pope Francis. We want to look also and keep very clearly in mind the institutional question, because once someone begins to denigrate the Supreme Pontiff, the Pope, or to say that he's not the Pope, there starts to be a kind of dissolution of the church institutionally. And I've even spoken with Archbishop Viganó about this question. And then the next aspect of the matter is this world globalism and this creation of a global religion, which in some way there's been an invitation to the Vatican to participate in or perhaps even lead it.
Right.
And I wanted to go through all of these points. I don't think we can do it in this 1 hour, but this is all coming to a head now. And the 2 or 3 other facts that I wanted to put out there is, I had a meeting a few months ago with Cardinal Becciu, who's been now depicted as the great evil, corrupt figure in the Vatican. He was the sostituto, and he has been condemned after a multi-million-dollar trial, along with a number of others, 11 defendants, for sending $100,000 to a charity in Sardinia where his brother is on the board of directors. And Pope Francis, according to Becciu, told him, I don't care about the London Palace deal. That could have been a $100 million mistake, but that happens sometimes with investments. And I know that you are entrusted with investing. You hope that will go up 20%, 50%, double. The London Palace went down. However, if you really look at the case,
Yes.
it might not have even been a loss if they had held it instead of selling out. In any case, Becciu said he was attending a meeting in the Vatican where they discussed excommunicating Viganó a year or 2 ago. And they decided not to do it because they would make him into a martyr. All right? So now somebody has had a meeting now recently to decide at this point in time, 6 years after 2018, 4 years after all the articles and letters about the COVID virus, and then 3 years after all the articles about the vaccines, 2 years after the articles about the war in Ukraine. Finally, there's been something has happened that they had another meeting and decided to prosecute him. Father Murr, before the broadcast, you suggested what it might have been.
Shall I say it out loud?
Well, we're a little cautious because we don't know what's going to happen to us. And I must
That is a problem. That is a real problem, Robert. You know that.
And I want to say that I too have been threatened. I've been threatened that I will regret it if I continue to do and to write and to speak in a certain way.
Yeah.
But I just passed the age where I decided that my journey is leading towards eternity in any case. And I'm getting older, a little bit weaker, and my memory is declining a bit. So now, with you in particular, Father Murr, I've started with these podcasts to try to reach again out and describe what has happened for the good of the church and for the good of the gospel as best I can, often with your help, with your knowledge, but your good spirits. And I could perhaps become a little too gloomy if I just relied on my own vision.
But you know, Robert, what you're saying is exactly what I tried to do writing Murder in the 33rd Degree. I never imagined I just never imagined that it was going to be a successful book. That's not it. What I was imagining was what you just got done saying. I'm getting older. My memory is, I notice my memory failing me in a lot of crazy ways sometimes, and sometimes in serious ways. I wanted to get what happened with Cardinal Gagnon and his investigation written down as a part of history. And I thank Professor Roberto De Mattei for writing the introduction to it, because he also knew Gagnon and Mario Marini and verified exactly the story. So it is historical documentation now. But it's exactly what you're saying. We're already at an age, I'm in my 70s, well into my 70s now, and I could go to God at any time, and as long as I'm in the state of grace, I don't care. As a matter of fact, it would be wonderful. It would be. I mean that. I really mean that.
Okay,
but
so we're
these things. You want to say what you need to say, and I want to say what I need to say, and we both want to say it because we happen to love the Catholic Church very much. The Church has been our mother all of our life, and we really look at her that way. We want to defend her and continue loving her. And when we see her hurting, as we do today, we're trying to find why that's happening so that it can be addressed and cured. That's what we're doing all of this. That's
Absolutely.
what we're talking on these programs. We're looking for the cure of what ails our mother, in a word.
Okay. We have a note on the screen. If people like what we're saying and they want to support us, please do a thumbs up and a like, subscribe, and forward this link to others. I would say also, okay, back in 2015, I worked with Archbishop Viganó on a number of projects when he was nuncio in Washington, when the Pope visited America. I don't want to go into that, but we had a close relationship then. 2018, he finally wrote his testimony, and he was regarded by many as a lightning rod figure who, on the one hand, had finally told the truth about why certain things have been covered up, and yet his rhetoric was sort of a harsh rhetoric and very condemnatory. Sometimes we weren't sure he had all the evidence, and therefore others said that he is disgracing his role as an archbishop with his attacks on his fellow archbishops, bishops, cardinals, and on the Pope himself. 2019, I spent a whole week with him, and we wrote the book with interviews called Finding Viganó. 2020, in the spring, I was still preparing the book for publication. The COVID virus hit, and all the churches were closed down, and we spoke together about whether this was the abomination of desolation, when it had been prophesied that at some time the Mass would cease. And then in 2021, both the vaccination came, people were fired from their work. The COVID virus already was sort of passing away by that time, if you recall.
Yes.
And later that year, it passed away completely. In any case, the facts are what I've always been interested in. I am not interested in conspiracy theories, but it is true that Viganó went in a trajectory from the McCarrick case and moral corruption in the church to a second main area of concern, which had various strands, including Francis, the election of Francis, his legitimacy, but other strands included doctrinal corruption. So let's say the two main streams in Viganó's thought were moral corruption and cover-up at the beginning, for which reason he said because Francis hadn't handled it well, he called for Francis to resign. But as he reflected and started to study, and he even asked me to try to study the history of the Jesuits, he said, tell me what you find. And as you look at the Jesuits, they were different strands or movements in the order. There were the more conservative Jesuits and the more liberal Jesuits. and they started to become that leading group in the church which wanted to be more modern. And perhaps their leader we may consider Carlo Maria Martini, the Cardinal of Milan, the former head of the Biblicum in Rome, and a very impressive man, but someone who had started to believe that the church's teaching was retrograde, that needed to be updated, in particular on sexual morality. So Viganó started to write that this corruption of doctrine had entered into the bloodstream of the church, and it had really already started back in the modernist times of the late 1800s, early 1900s, when Pius X was fighting it. But it had received a new entrance and a new power at the Second Vatican Council. This raised the question of how to interpret the council, and I want to say Pope Benedict wrestled with this throughout his life. Pope Benedict, as a young man, age 35, stood on the steps of St. Peter's Basilica as a peritus, a very rather young peritus, for Cardinal Frings of Germany. And he was handing out on the first and second day mimeograph sheets saying, "Bishops, vote against the Vatican schema. Let's have an open council. Let's just not come and rubber stamp the schema. Let's have a new openness in the church, and let's play our role as bishops." And they decided in those next days to not simply take the prepared schema, prepared under John the 23rd, by the way.
Yes.
But later in his life,
and Robert, begun by Pope Pius XII.
Yes. So the church knew that there needed to be some sort of modernization. We were a little bit, almost like the Amish in some ways, who are so beautiful. In fact, I even lived for 3 months with the Amish when I was 20 years old. I went to Birmingham, Pennsylvania, trying to find a more simple life instead of Harvard University. But in any case,
you seem to have found it now, Robert.
Well, this. Viganó decided that something had crept in and been entangled inside the documents of the Second Vatican Council. And there are many scholars, and I want to appeal even to Pope Benedict himself, who said in his writings, and we could have a whole program on this, that there were time bombs in the documents of the council where there were votes made that people said, okay, we'll accept it because in and of itself, this is not unacceptable. But it could be drawn out in different ways. And the teachings on in particular on ecumenism and on the fact that the Catholic Church subsists in the Roman Catholic Church, that was a very special word that was chosen. They were struggling throughout the council for 4 years under all sorts of global financial and journalistic pressures. And we can think about Father Malachi Martin as one figure in all of that, who was providing information to the Time magazine correspondent in Rome at that time. So the council and the history of the council is a question. And Viganó used to tell me that he had been very favorable to the council. And in the late 60s, he had thought it had been a wonderful thing. But only as time passed did he realize that something. Yeah. Okay. So I've talked too much. Go ahead and say something.
No. You haven't talked too much. What I'm just agreeing with you. It's like a marriage. It's like a marriage that's gone wrong. And then you start to look at it 10 years later. And why are marriages annulled after 10 years of living together, 15, 20 years of living together? How can they be annulled? Because they were wrong from the beginning. That's why they're annulled. And what happened with the council was there was such a breath of fresh air and excitement, Robert. We were all excited about this council because it sounded wonderful. It sounded wonderful. They were talking about bringing all Christians back together into one church. What a magnificent thing. The unity, all of this. It was great. We were not told that to do that, we would have to sell off everything that we held true to. We would have to ignore the truth of dogma and of doctrine to do all of that. That came with time. We started seeing that all of a sudden, what we're giving up all of these points of our Catholic identity for this unity that was nowhere. It wasn't happening. As a matter of fact, there's more division today than ever. So it didn't fulfill its promise. But at the beginning, there was great promise. Not too many people were against the council right from the beginning. They just weren't. They started to, as they saw how it was being implemented.
Okay, well, this means that to raise questions about how to receive and interpret what happened at Second Vatican Council is not something that should be off the board entirely.
No, it shouldn't be. As a matter of fact, Robert, let me say this. There should be, I remember suggesting this to Cardinal Gagnon. We were driving and I said to him, I've been thinking, why doesn't the Holy Father, who was Benedict actually at that time, why doesn't he call Vatican III? Why doesn't he call another council to be able to figure out the Second Vatican Council? I mean, to really clarify things. And Gagnon just turned to me and he said, in that inimitable fashion that he had, in that accent that he had, he said, you would give those men a chance to destroy what they didn't get to destroy in the second one? That's exactly what he said, right? And he wasn't being funny. He meant it, because he saw the destruction. He saw what they had done with things. But I still say there has to be. Why can't there be an examination, a real examination of the Second Vatican Council? People have issues with it. Why aren't they taken up, discussed, and come?
They are taken up, but they're almost immediately denounced. The Society of St. Pius X has made critiques of about 5 points of doctrine. And you probably...
Well, yes, Robert, that's what I'm saying. I know that. Why aren't there... In many of the councils, there were great debates. These debates should be televised. There should be a pro and a con. Certainly. Let's get these things out in the open and get them understood so that people know where they're standing. I think it would be a great idea. I really would, if it would be done, and if things were not manipulated, but honestly looked at and discussed. Your point is, and my point is, there are problems with the Second Vatican Council.
Okay,
there just are.
Oh, yes, and I would say we've got 3 points that Viganó is accused on. One is not being respectful of the Holy Father, not being in communion with Pope Francis, and denying the Second Vatican Council. On each of those points, there would probably be things that could be said. How much open area do we have to tell a bishop, a priest, or the Pope that we are very concerned about the decision he's making prudentially and maybe even morally and doctrinally? And at the very least, how much are we allowed to say it's confusing? We need more clarity. Cardinal Sarrat told me 1 week ago, personally, he said he would have liked the Pope to have spoken more clearly on doctrine on a number of occasions. The Pope, for whatever reason, chose not to. I would add in parenthesis, there may be things we do not know about what pressures Pope Francis is under, what he's been told about what the international order will do to the church if the church doesn't bow. This may explain why he is giving them the impression of going along with many things, while at the very limit on each point, like abortion, he speaks of as something a mafioso, hitman. In other words, he's never taught that abortion is right. He's just said that I understand that these people feel, so many people felt that they would. He didn't say that the church is changing its teaching on many of these points. So, Francis, what level of freedom do we have to say we're concerned about the confusion, or we're concerned about the teaching being distorted? What do you say about that?
I said we have every right in the world. We have every right in the world to be able to be concerned about the teaching of the church. Why wouldn't we have a right? As baptized members of the church, we have a right. We have a right to clarity. We have a right to honesty. We certainly do. Now, that there are certain things that we don't understand. Sure, when I was growing up, there were certain decisions my mother and my father took that I didn't understand. Later on, I understood, but I didn't have the maturity at that time. That's fine. And there are certain decisions that the Vatican as a government decides it's going to take because it has diplomatic relationships and it's on different levels with governments. Fine. If that's the game they want to play and win it at it, that's fine. However, when it comes down to the faith, we have every reason to be in the know of what's happening. And when we feel that the faith and the articles of faith, dogma and doctrine, are being toyed with and played with for reasons that we do, I don't know, I don't understand the reasons. For unity, I don't know what they want. A world government, a world church, a world religion, one world religion. I don't know what, that's got to be their goal, because they're toying with things that cannot be toyed with. Okay. They're looking at things that cannot be changed. They cannot be changed. And if they are changed, then the church ceases to exist.
Well,
the church ceases to exist. It's that simple.
Well, the church cannot cease to exist.
Robert, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that. I'm saying if such a thing would happen, the church would cease to exist. If Jesus Christ told a lie, he would not be Jesus Christ. Okay, I can say the same thing. Well, that's not going to happen. And I'm saying the same thing with the church. It's not going to happen. But these people there are many people in the Vatican who are pushing for it to happen.
Okay, I'm going to be very controversial and cite from Viganó's statement about what his response is to these accusations that he's in schism, that he's not in communion with Pope Francis, and that he is therefore liable to be implicitly, what's implicit in this accusation is he will be judged and then excommunicated. He writes, I'm quoting him, "I am honored not to have, and indeed I do not want, any ecclesial communion with them. Theirs is a lobby which conceals its complicity with the masters of the world in order to deceive many souls and prevent any resistance against the establishment of the kingdom of Antichrist." Powerful words. Some people will say he's gone too far, and some cardinals have told me that they liked some of the things he said early on, but that this has gone too far. But I will read another sentence. Quote, "In the face of the dicastery's accusations, I claim," this is Archbishop Viganó, "as successor of the apostles," because he is a bishop, "to be in full communion with the Roman Catholic Apostolic Church, with the magisterium of the Roman pontiffs, and with the uninterrupted doctrinal, moral, and liturgical tradition which they have faithfully preserved. I repudiate the neo-modernist errors inherent in the Second Vatican Council and in the so-called post-conciliar magisterium, in particular in matters of collegiality, ecumenism, religious freedom, the secularity of the state, and the liturgy." So there you have his manifesto.
Very good. Now, you just said, perhaps, about 5 minutes ago, you said, perhaps the Holy Father knows things that we don't know.
Yes,
right?
I did.
Perhaps the Holy Father, all right, and I agree with that. I'm sure he knows a lot more than we know. I mean, as a matter of fact, I don't wonder. I'm sure that he does. I also believe that Viganó knows an awful lot more than we know about the running of things, how things are being managed. He was nuncio, for goodness sake, of the United States of America for years. I'm sure he picked up what's going on. He's a sharp man, and his opinion his opinion is not like the man who sells bagels down the street. His opinion is a very studied opinion and a very laudable one. People respected him for his opinion. Bishops became bishops because of his opinion. Priests became bishops because of his opinion, right? So there's a lot of weight there. You asked something before, and I was trying to shy away from it, but I think I'm not going to.
Okay.
You went for years. We went for years with this struggle between Viganó and the Vatican, not to say the Pope himself. There's been a struggle between them both, and we've heard this going on back and forth. Viganó is bringing up valid points, and we are all waiting for those points to be addressed. They're never addressed. This is the problem. And this is from a pontificate that promised to be open, clear, transparent, honest. And it has not been. Everything stayed back and forth. We had this back and forth thing going on for years, until about 3 weeks ago.
Okay, I know what you're going to say.
All right, until about 3 weeks ago. And I'm not going to go into the matter of what was said, because it's not been proven. It's not been proven. And I'm simply saying that it was said, and all of a sudden action was being taken. Well, action wasn't being taken with McCarrick. Action wasn't being taken with this one, with that one. My goodness, we have a Jesuit who was excommunicated for horrendous things that he did with nuns.
Yeah, Father Marco Rupnik.
Yes, and then the excommunication lifted, and he's back in everybody's great graces and a consultant in various affairs inside the Vatican. This is what people are not understanding.
Well,
this doesn't make sense.
Let's go back to the 3 weeks ago. You did not say the full story. Tell us what happened.
Well, yeah, it's I enjoy my head being connected to my body too. That's I guess. But
Okay.
but I'll say it.
No,
I'll say it.
Okay.
The Archbishop Viganó made a remark saying that the Holy Father was also guilty of the same thing of McCarrick. Now, he didn't say what that was. McCarrick might have stolen $100,000 from the collection basket. I don't know. But all I'm saying is that all of a sudden, he's being put on the chopping block.
So you're
All
connecting. You're
Yes,
connecting.
I am connecting. Yes, I am.
The remark 3 weeks ago in one of his writings that a seminarian, I believe, had come to him from Argentina and said that he had suffered some type of abuse and the perpetrator had been Jorge Bergoglio. People read that and said, wow, this is a very devastating accusation, but where's the evidence? Where's an affidavit? Where's the name of this seminarian? Where's the statement of when this occurred? None of that has come out. But what you're saying is that the fact that this allegation sort of crept out led quickly to the decision to try and excommunicate Archbishop Viganó.
I believe so. And you yourself said you talked to him, and he has no idea of what they're talking about. That he was given this summons or this, and nothing had happened. He said he denied anything happening.
Well,
or am I missing?
Here, I will read what he just texted to me. Non sono andato a Roma. I did not go to Rome. Ne ho mandato un avvocato, nor did I send a lawyer. Non credo ci sia da sapere. I don't believe there's any need to know. Niente di più, nothing more, rispetto a quanto ho pubblicato oggi. With regard to what I published today. That's the letter that we were just citing from, the letter, his statement on what happened. So the press is writing, or part of the press is writing, that sources in the congregation say Viganó came to Rome, presented himself, and presented his defense yesterday, and he's texting me that he did not. So there's a fundamental question of truth right there, as in so many of these cases. And this goes back even to Cardinal Gagnon and his study in the 70s. And I just want to bring up once again that these investigations of Gagnon, then Paul VI died, and a guy named Marco Pecorelli published about the 16th of September of 79, when John Paul I had been Pope for 2 weeks, a list of more than hundreds of.
We're having some technical problems here. I'm losing contact with you all. It's certainly on my part here. My point is, yes, we've been over this. The thing is this: I asked on this program and on other programs that I've been on, Terry and Jesse, also in Spanish in Argentina. I've been on Father Ravasi's program, has a great following, asking the Pope to please make public Gagnon's report on the infiltration of Freemasonry in the Vatican. That's almost 50 years old. There's no reason. Most of the culpable people are dead.
Yeah,
I was one of the youngest people involved in the whole thing. I'm still alive, but I'll soon be dead. I mean, that's publish it. Let people see. You want transparency? That's a great thing. It won't be. This is what people are upset about. We're talking about the church entering a new era of honesty, openness, and this, and nothing really is happening with that. It's not. They're not following through on that. This is what is frustrating many people. I'll tell you one thing. It's frustrating hundreds of thousands of priests. Hundreds of thousands of priests are suffering right now. They just are, from confusion themselves, because they don't feel that there's leadership. I can't tell you the telephone calls, emails, letters that I get from priests all over the world, and young priests who are confused by this whole thing. Nothing is being answered. Nothing is being explained. This is not fair.
Okay.
This is not fair.
Okay, so we're in a crisis, and I have to also say I had conversation even with Cardinal Parolin, the Secretary of State, so the man next to the Pope, the right hand of the Pope, on more than one occasion. I would say 3 times for as much as an hour. And he would ask me, am I still in touch with Archbishop Viganó? And he would say, we're very concerned. Will you please tell him that his actions, he was saying Archbishop Viganó has been ordaining priests. He said, we've been told, we have information that he's been ordaining priests outside of the normal diocesan ordination process. And I said, do you think it would be possible that the two men, Archbishop Viganó and Pope Francis, could come together, talk things through, say, here you've exaggerated, here you've been confusing, here you've done something against the faith, and come to some type of meeting of the minds of two important Catholic leaders? And he said, well, it would not be something we would exclude, but the Archbishop would have to come first begging forgiveness for his way of treating the Pope. And then Archbishop Viganó said that he was concerned also about coming to Rome and having such a visit. He was thinking that it would be improper and unfruitful for many reasons. So I made an effort over the past couple of years, or 3 or 4 years, to try to have a meeting. Now this looks like a definitive break is right on the horizon. What's this going to do to the church? What's it going to do to the Archbishop? And any thoughts you have on that matter?
I'll say this, half in defense of His Holiness. If the comments that Archbishop Viganó made have no backing to them, shame on him. Shame on him.
You're referring to the accusation of abuse the 3 weeks ago?
Yes. If there's nothing to that, shame on him for even bringing it up. I remember when that happened to Pope Paul VI. Do you remember that? a French author,
I do.
right? All of that. That was a
Paul,
whole.
he accused Paul VI of having some sort of relationship with someone.
Yeah, it was terrible. But I mean, the Paul VI suffered tremendously from other things, and that on top of it. Anyway, these are shameless things, and a lot of times these things are used to destroy a man, to destroy it. It's called. This is what Pope John Paul II often referred to as Russian misinformation. The Russians were masters at this, of planting all sorts of things. It's one of the reasons that Pope John Paul II had difficulty believing some of the allegations against priests they were real allegations, not made up ones, because he had heard this all of his life under the communists. They would put out things like this that were not true, just to demoralize the faith and the faithful. Anyway, if it's not true, and he made these remarks, it's shame on him. If it is true, there's another problem. That's another problem. The point is, we're in a situation that's very critical, and it's critical because the church officialdom has not been dealing honestly, openly, and correctly with an awful lot of people.
Yes, and we now open up the Pope being 87 years old. It's possible that he could live a number more years, but it's possible that it will be within a year or two that we will have a conclave. And then there are people who have such doubts about him in the present crisis. We have Jack Gordon writing more or less in agreement with you, Father Murr. Let me be clear, if Viganó does not have more proof, then Father Murr is right. Shame on him. So, but what I'm talking about is the institutional destabilization of the Roman Catholic Church, which has proceeded in some ways already far advanced, with many of our religious orders in disarray.
Yes.
And many of our schools no longer profoundly Catholic, and even great confusion among the faith. And I would even say each of us has some responsibility, as we have not stood up for the church of all time, the faith of all time, as we might possibly have done with the talents given to us. So if the next conclave is contested, if people say, well, some of the cardinals made by Pope Francis shouldn't attend because there were so many questions about him, this is an institutional destabilization of the church.
Yes, it is.
And I think there are forces out there that really are gleefully rubbing their hands.
Saying, there are.
Our plan is far advanced.
Yep.
And therefore, I do think still now that people should talk and probably have a press conference and say, this is the situation on this point. This is the situation on this point. Because all of us are wondering, I'm getting emails and texts, what should we do?
Yes. I think, Robert, I think there's another thing that's happening. It's been happening for centuries, and it's been happening now when it cannot happen now. I don't think the Vatican has the right read on what's happening to the church in the world. I really don't. I don't think they do. They're upset. They want to abolish the Tridentine Mass. They want to abolish this. They want to. Robert, these traditionalist orders, congregations, fraternities they have the most vocations of anyone in the world.
Yeah. Now this raises.
I just looked at some of the statistics of Christ the King, of Pius X, of the congregation of Fraternity of St. Peter. I mean, it's amazing the number of priests and of seminarians that they have. Robert, last year, Ireland ordained one priest. Ireland, all of Ireland. I mean, it's time to get real. It's time to get real.
I mean, what you're saying is, I heard, I don't know the exact figures, but I heard that just 1 or 3 priests in Dublin, or 1 in 3 priests.
Okay, Robert, let me go wild and say 3.
Yeah.
Okay, good. 3 priests in Ireland were ordained last year.
Yeah. And then in Paris, similar. So the church, like a plant in the garden that's drooping over and has no fertilizer and no water, it's drying out, it's starting to die. It's something you can observe with your eyes and by the numbers. And at the same time, the church people need the sacraments, they need baptism, they need the Eucharist, they need
the sacraments, and for the sacraments, they have to have priests. Now, the point is, my whole point was the greatest number of priestly vocations, of priests to begin with, and of priestly vocations and rise and on the rise and growing and developing are the more traditional orders that have come up in the last 40, 50 years. But those are the ones they're talking about axing, about chopping off.
This is what I was just going to say. Even aside from the case of Viganó, which is a very key case, it's a kind of cornerstone case now, how this works out. It does appear he will be excommunicated. What is happening with the old liturgy? Now we are being reported by Diane Montagna and others that they want to eliminate it officially from every parish in the world.
And this is what leads people, Robert, even people on the left. I have some friends who are lefties. I have friends all over the place. Even the people on the left, people are very concerned about the attitude, why the Vatican is going after these people. It doesn't make any sense. It does not make any sense. We have all sorts of rites in the Catholic Church where their masses are in Greek, they're in Ruthenian, they're in Arabic, they're in Syriac. The Vatican doesn't get upset and say that they have to follow the new rite of Bugnini. They don't do that. They give them liberty. Why in the world wouldn't they do that to a whole group who are Catholic and want to remain Catholic and are fighting for the Catholic cause and are giving men and women to that cause left and right? Why are these people considered enemies? They're not. This is what leads a lot of people to believe that there's something wrong with those who are believing that these are enemies. There's something wrong with people who would go out of their way to destroy something that's been flourishing for years. Well, this is a real problem.
Well, the problem is this, that the emphasis on sanctity, sanctus, 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 God is holy. The emphasis on a type of morality which leads toward holiness, which is self-denial, which is not gluttony, it's not greed, it's not the 7 deadly sins.
Which is carrying your cross.
Carrying your cross. This is the teaching of Christ, the way of Christ, that we become like him by passing through and carrying our own crosses. This is disliked by those who want simply to let it be, let it all hang out, do what you will, and no limitation. It's viewed as.
Don't you see any irony there? do what you will, do whatever you feel is right. Well, these people are doing what's right. No, we can't tolerate that.
Oh yeah, you're saying it's a contradiction, then that.
Of course it is. Of course it is.
But what I'm saying is, in the world, the standard of holiness of the church was very high, and people knew that somewhere in a chapel and in a rectory and in a monastery, there were people focused on eternity. Our world seems to desire that notion that there's a different realm, a realm of eternity, a realm of holiness, that can exist. That idea that it can exist must be eliminated. That seems to me to be what's behind everything.
That is behind what's everything. And many of those people with that spirit are inside the church and occupy positions of great authority.
Okay, so we don't have any more time, but we're speaking to you from a
just when I was getting into it.
We're speaking to you from a partially occupied church. We're struggling to maintain.
From the bunker. We're in the bunkers.
Well, but we are also out in the public presence, and we're going to visit you in October in Spain, we'd like to have 4 or 5 more people join that retreat where we will discuss all these things in great depth. You will be celebrating Mass for us. We did it last March, and we had a wonderful time. It's in southern Spain with Father Murr for a week, and it'll be toward the end of October. You can find that on InsideTheVaticanPilgrimages.com, a retreat with Father Murr. And we also are going to Rome once again at Christmas for the opening of the Jubilee. I must say that this battle over Rome is, of course, a great, how should I describe it? It takes my own health away. Can I say that?
Yeah, you can. It would be, and you'd be telling the absolute truth. We all feel that way.
Sometimes I can't breathe very well. I feel under stress, and I do want to follow through what my father told me, my mother, and my first grade teacher. She said, Bobby, never betray the faith.
That's right.
So we're trying to hold on, and we want to be reasonable. We don't want to be ideological and narrow. And if there is anything about what we're saying that is not fully focused on the Logos, Christ, the Word of God, and on the necessity for faith, for hope, and for charity towards everyone, love of God and love of neighbor, then we still have much to do in our spiritual lives. But you as a pastor, Father, can perhaps give a final statement here on how everyone can face these troubles that we are now directly in front of, as it looks like the church may be splitting up.
Yes, it looks like we are at the threshold of schism. It certainly seems that way. We've been fearing this for years, but I believe that's what it's coming to. All I can tell you is this, Robert, and I know I speak for a number of people. There have been people, hundreds of people have stopped by here to talk to me about this. They've come out of their way to come and visit me here in person. Phone calls, emails, galore. Everyone is concerned about the future. Everyone is concerned about this. All I'll tell you is this: I am not leaving the Catholic Church for love nor for money. I'm staying right where I am. So are you, Robert. And so is every faithful Catholic who's listening to us. We are staying inside. We are not jumping ship. We're not jumping off the bark of Peter. We're staying right where we are. And we're trying to be as faithful as we can. And God forgive those of us who are imperfect in that. But these are confusing times, and I'm sure that the good Lord understands our confusion with the times. So just stick with it, stick with it, stick with it. Don't take your focus off Christ. First and foremost, His will. Do it. Live these circumstances the best you can. And remember that throughout the ages, there have been people who have suffered tremendously for the faith. Years in concentration camps, years in prison, beheaded, drawn and quartered, all of this for their faith in Jesus Christ. And we are being put through, in comparison, a small test. A small test. Be faithful to Christ, be faithful to the church, stay inside, not outside, and you'll pass that test.
Thank you, Father Murr. Thank you all.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Robert Moynihan. God love you, and God love you, our listeners. Let's keep all of us together in prayer, shall we? Let's do that. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Father.
Join us for a unique pilgrimage, a Lenten retreat with Father Murr in March 2024. Pilgrimage